Hey, you might have just caught the image of Mike O'Neill there for a moment. Here he is.
Hey, Mike.
Mike is
Morning.
a longtime political analyst here in the Valley. What's your, as you look ahead to primary election day tomorrow, and do you think all the talk about mail-in voting is going to impact people's decision to in-person vote perhaps this time around instead of mail-in voting?
Well, I think what the effect of that has been very clear, and it's partisan. You have Donald Trump saying you can't trust mail-in votes. So a lot of his people believe him, and they vote in person. And that's why when we look at the mail-in votes that comes in, and very often, especially if it's sent in late, is counted at the very end. That's why we have this trend that the day of election is more Republican. And as you count the later mail-in votes, it becomes more Democrat. Perfectly predictable. Your Republican president says don't count on mail-in vote. By the way, that's the exact opposite of what it used to be. In the old days, when mail-in votes was very small, it was called absentee voting. You needed an excuse.
Right.
And it tended to be Republican business people who are traveling out of state. And so the mail-in, I remember the first election that I covered in this state was 1980, Barry Goldwater. It was 1 a.m. I was on another station, and Barry Goldwater was losing his last election. And about 1 a.m., I went to the news director, and I think he was still behind.
Yeah.
And I said, I think he's going to pull this out.
Because of those mail-in.
Because of the mail-in votes, which were heavily Republican, and that's what happened.
We were just chatting a moment during the break and talking about the state of politics in Arizona. Kind of give us your thoughts as you kind of look independent, Republican, where we lie as we head on in.
Yeah, well, look at basic numbers. We've got 28% of the electorate is Democratic. 35% is Republican. There's another 35% who are independent. You look at that and you say, well, we're a Republican state. That basically is true. Well, why are the Democrats winning? Because if you take that 35% Republican ballpark, 20% of that is MAGA, Trump loyalists. 15% is what I would call traditional conservative Republicans. We're talking people like John McCain, Jeff Flake, John Kyle. Okay, and a lot of those folks are somewhat reticent to vote for the more extreme MAGA candidate, which is exactly, so the MAGA faction is dominant. And by the way, it's 20 to 15. It's probably even wider than that in Republican primary voters. And you look at the commercials that people are running,
right?
Everybody's trying to say, I'm endorsed more by Trump than you are. I'm more MAGA than you are.
Yeah,
that works great in the primary.
Right.
And it's deadly in November, and that's why we are still a Republican state. About a Republican +7 is the natural thing. Why did, in this still Republican state, not a purple state, why did Democrats run the gamut on statewide elections? That's because the Republicans elected MAGA candidates they got most of the Republican votes, but the independent votes are very malleable. They could go either way, and the independent votes are 50-50, but they're not terribly MAGA. So that's what's happened here in the last.
Any indication which way they're going to go this time, if it is an off-year election?
Yeah, well, the first thing, this is the elections that have been held in the last year. So we got a baseline in Arizona of, let's say, generic Republican against generic Democrat. In a normal year, Republican wins by 7%. But, and a MAGA candidate, not as good as that. But what has happened in the last year, the Democrats have been beating the spread by an average of 10%. That is an extraordinarily high number, and even the most optimistic Democrats don't think they're going to do that well. But they're clearly going to do better than the baseline. So some races that would normally be a toss-up tend to be lean Democrat. And even, for example, among the congressional races, there's one race, 1 and 6 are the toss-up races. We know that because those are absolute talk. 6 is Schweikert. I'm sorry, 1 is Schweikert's district. It's an even district, and it's got knowing because Schweikert's running for governor.
Well, let's talk about it here. I mean, it is Amish Shah, Marlene Galan Woods, two fairly prominent names in Democratic Party circles.
Very much so. Now, the extraordinary thing there, when we were off camera, I was mentioning there's almost no polling available on this. The only one I saw in this race goes back to February, so it's to be not terribly trusted. But she was beating him. I'm sorry, she was behind him. He was ahead by 3-1. And the extraordinary thing that nobody really understands, she got an endorsement by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Normally, they don't involve themselves in primary elections, and it's kind of a head-scratcher why that is. Maybe there's private polling that they've done that shows that she's stronger than that. I think it suggests she has some pretty good connections in Washington, but it's really a head scratcher because usually they don't get involved until we have a
Let's talk about some of these other races. We still have about 3 minutes. Go ahead. Superintendent here, Tom Horn, Kimberly Yee. What do you think?
She was the lead Republican vote getter in the last election. She's currently state treasurer. I think this is a case where, Tom Horn's been around forever, and the question is probably a little more well-known than she is for that reason. Is Tom Horn past his sell-by date is kind of the question.
Oh, yeah. We've heard that before.
Yeah.
That could be the question.
He had some scandals that he survived, but she was, like I said, the lead vote getter in the last election.
Let's talk AG.
Yeah. Everybody trying
Peterson.
This is like who is more MAGA than thou is what all the commercials are. They're nasty. The big winner out of that, I think, is Kris Mayes. And the nastier this gets, whoever wins that is going to come out weakened. But again, we're a Republican plus 6 or 7% state. Kris Mayes, I think, has been a very popular attorney general, but there is there's that innate Republican advantage, but countervailing that, there's the fact that this is likely to be a Democratic wave election. Those two kind of cancel out, suggesting a close race.
You bring up Kris Mayes. Interesting because I feel like Democratic women in this state have done well over the years. I think of Janet Napolitano for whatever reason, and then Hobbs is elected as well. I think Kris Mayes has done a great job in terms of bringing to the forefront what she's done in terms of work. She's with the media, not talking politics or partisan or what she's actually done in terms of work, but she's done a great job, spotlighting her work so that the public knows that she's actually doing something.
And she doesn't have to face a nasty primary. That's an indication of her popularity and incumbency.
Yeah.
Speaking of nasty primaries, what about the congressional district out in the East Valley? Where do you see this thing headed?
Well,
Keenan versus Lamb.
I don't know who gets the nomination, but I know whoever does wins the election. That's a deeply Republican district.
Right.
Lamb, there's been some serious scandals that may kibosh his. I think otherwise he had a cakewalk.
I like a guy who uses kibosh.
Yeah,
you
Once in
too.
a while.
Yeah.
But that is a heavily Republican district. Even a wave Democratic year, whoever wins that primary is elected to Congress.
If we could go back to the Horn and the Yee race, someone has a question up here. Thomas Favola says age limits. Have you ever looked into that polling in terms of what people feel about Arizona voters feel on age limits for offices?
Not specifically Arizona, but I think there is a sentiment that we have far too many octogenarians elected, but the same people who at one point will say we're electing people who are too old, go back to familiar names when they vote. All those folks are getting reelected. Most of them are getting reelected because they're in safe districts.
Okay.
So in that district, for example, whoever gets that nomination will be elected and probably can have that seat for as long as they want it. That's the big seat, I believe, and he could have gotten reelected to Congress forever.
So you think Lamb can survive this particular scandal? He does have the Trump endorsement.
He does. The Trump endorsement is worth a lot in the Republican primary.
Okay.
Now, and that's a heavily, I would get, but I'm telling you, I'm out of my element in terms of numbers here. I'm making a wild guess that his persona being far more well known than an unknown challenger would give him the advantage. But those scandals cut pretty deep, so it's a guess.
Interesting, right? It has been interesting to watch as well as the ads and the commercials, the one on Yee from Horn, and how that may have affected the race moving forward as well. That was controversial.
They're nasty, and you ask people, they say, "Well, I hate all these nasty commercials, but look at that." SOB, look what he did, And where did they get that information? They got that information from the
You know what's great about Mike when he comes in? He's the most laid-back guy. You can visit with him out in the green room
he's
area.
hanging out.
He comes in here, and he is charged up.
He's fired up.
Yeah. For everybody who
I've
hasn't
lived
voted
politics
yet.
my whole life. It's a great sport.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for coming in, buddy.